Hello, welcome back to the Middle of Culture. This is episode 14, and I am one of your hosts, Peter Jones.
And I'm your other host, Eden Jones.
Well, how have you been doing, Eden? We chatted a little bit before we started recording, but how have things been in your world?
Well, pretty okay. I got my Retroid Pocket 2 Plus in the mail yesterday. So
I don't even know what this is. Tell me about this.
A Retroid Pocket 2 is a emulating device. It's like a small, it's about the size of like a Nintendo DS, but is basically just designed to be an emulation device. It runs Android, but it doesn't have like super strong specs inside, so you're not running like Xbox 360 games on this thing, but you can run basically everything up through, Sega, Saturn, and N64 and PS1 like butter, and you can also run a lot of that next generation PS2, GameCube era. Mostly I got it to give me an excuse to play the GBA versions of all of the early Final Fantasy games, because everyone says those are the best versions of those early Final Fantasies, even better than the pixel remasters that came out last year. And the nice thing about doing the Retroid is thievery. I'm not paying for these. I'm just downloading ROMs and throwing them on.
Of course. You own all of these cartridges, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I definitely own GBA cartridges. I've never owned a GBA, but I have a GBA cart for Final Fantasy 1 and 2 early years, Final Fantasy 4, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy 5, and Final Fantasy 6, definitely.
Of course. I mean, the ROMs, those are just backup.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. No thievery has ever occurred.
That sounds kind of cool.
That's not true. Steal from corporations. They deserve it.
I myself have on order a play date that will come someday. I think I'm in wave 3 or 4, so I'm still a few months out for that thing. But guess what's supposed to come tomorrow?
What's that?
That would be my Steam Deck.
Oh, that's the big thing right now, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I would love one of those, but the problem is I don't play Final Fantasy 14 through Steam, so I wouldn't be able to play that in bed. That's why I got the Retroid, so I can play some Final Fantasy in bed, even if it's not 14.
Well, you can put Windows on a Steam Deck and then just run stuff through there.
I know. So that sounds like a hassle.
Yeah, I know. That's because I was looking at it and I'm like, ooh, you know what this could potentially be really cool as? Would be a Game Pass Ultimate toy.
That's a good point.
Use like xCloud and try and do some of the streaming games because, it's a smaller screen and my network at home is pretty doggone fast. So there it might work. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's supposed to come tomorrow. Unfortunately, I will not be here. So I won't get to check it out until I'm back home on sometime Friday afternoon. But we shall see. Maybe we'll have an update in a couple of weeks. We can see about your Retroid thingamajobber that I can't remember the name for, and then we can see what the Steam Deck looks like.
Also, the other, as long as we're talking about consumerism, because we're American, we love to consume. We are very excited. My wife purchased and is arriving tomorrow a countertop dishwasher.
Ooh,
for us suckers. For us suckers who don't have a built-in dishwasher and can't really figure out the geometry to fit one of those like hook-upable wheel dishwashers really anywhere in our kitchen. Yes. And it's only the two of us, so we don't need a huge dishwasher. So we found a countertop one that even has built-in water storage, so you don't have to hook it up to the faucet the whole time that it's running, which is one of the problems with those like portable ones is they hook up to the faucet and then you can't use your sink for 3 hours.
Right.
But this one has a built-in reservoir, and so you just hook up the hose to drain down into the sink, and then you turn it on. And we are fairly certain that it will fit basically all of the dishes that we use in one day. So you just load it up and press start at the end of the day and wake up to nice clean dishes. We'll see.
That is a beautiful thing.
It might be a $400 mistake, but it's okay. It's that dink life. We can spend it, and if it's terrible, it is what it is.
Dishwashers are a beautiful thing. We were without for a number of months back in I think it was 2020. We had some issues where all of a sudden we found out that the dishwasher we had in place was leaking under the tile, and
oh no,
we had to have a restoration place come. Good news is it hadn't done any damage to the subflooring, so we just had to
that's good.
Tear out the old one, did not need to redo the subflooring, had to get some extra tiles to replace the ones they'd had to break and everything getting out. But then the hassle came in getting a new dishwasher. I don't know how appliances are now, but at the time we went to order this thing, end of 2020, we had to wait like 3 months for it to come. And
yeah, I've heard that for some things it is still that way.
Yeah. We ended up getting, we had a very noisy dishwasher. And so we got a new one that it's nice because it's quiet enough that I sometimes have to go over to it and be like, oh, okay, it is on. So that's been nice. We were fans of having it back, though it wasn't a bad thing to make the boys especially, wash dishes every time we dirtied dishes for a number of months. But it was also nice to get it back, so...
Well, we have been living the dishwasher-free life for 8 years at this point, so that's
a long time. That's much more than 3 months.
This house has never had a dishwasher, and we bought it in 2014, and so we've been living here 8 years, and it's been fine. But then Cassie was like, "I saw this on Instagram Reels, and I thought to myself, I think I want this." So we're getting it.
That's excellent. I hope that it works out well for you. I hope that it does what you're hoping it will.
Me too.
Well, before we jump into our main topic, anything else that you wanted to mention? One thing I'll throw out there, and I know I shared this with you, but man, the album Final Light, it's a collaboration between Johannes Persson, the lead singer, and one of the guitarists for Cult of Luna, who listeners of the pod would know that Eden and I have both previously discussed Cult of Luna and some of their works, and I'm a huge fan. And then Perturbator, who is kind of a French electronic darkwave / synthwave artist. And I think it was supposed to be back in 2020, or I think it was actually 2019 when they initially did this collaboration at Roadburn Festival. And then it's taken a little while for them to, because of, things like a global pandemic, get together and release an album. And I shared it with you. It has been an earworm for me. It's been mostly what I've been listening to the last 2 weeks since it came out. What did you think about it?
Oh, it's very good. It's very, very good. I've been a Perturbator fan for years, probably 7 or 8 years at this point. I got into them after I really got into Carpenter Brute, who still remains my favorite darkwave artist, but Perturbator is a close second. And so I was really excited to hear it. It's a really interesting fusion. I think that it is... One thing, I understand why it has the tempo that it has, because half of the group is Cult of Luna based, and they obviously are very slow, very, sludge metal, drone metal, like that very ponderous feel. But I do kind of miss the peppier, faster beats that Perturbator did on his earlier work. But I still think it's a very solid album. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up in my top 10. And if not, it will have just barely been edged out, because I think it's really solid.
Yeah, I think the same for me. I will be shocked if we're not talking about it again at the end of the year, at least on my list. And it sounds like, again, I think we'll both have things to say about it. So just wanted to throw that out there. I have enjoyed it a lot. It's probably been, one of the things that has musical albums that has drawn me in the most this year. And so I thought it was worth mentioning. But let's go ahead and jump in, because the Summer of X continues. And today we have the great and distinct pleasure of talking about X-Men: The Last Stand. That's right. It's that brilliant movie from 2006, directed by Brett Ratner. And before we jump in and go full spoilers, because again, the statute of limitations on this has long expired, Eden, what were your initial thoughts?
It's terrible. It's a bad movie, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, and that's maybe even more disappointing.
Yes.
Because it's mostly blandly bad. It's not bad enough to be in... This is a thing I wrote down in my notes. It's not so bad it's good, but it's also not so bad it's terrible, which is another thing entirely that I wonder if we'll get to with our next film, X-Men Origins Wolverine. That one might be in so bad it's terrible mode, but it's been a long time since I've seen it. This was mostly just blandly bad. It was just like, okay, that was how I felt while I was watching it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I loaded it up on my Apple TV, and you go to the main page to start playing it, and it has a whole bunch of stuff across the top, including it will have the rating from Rotten Tomatoes. And I think this one had a somewhat generous 53% or something like that. But, when it was over, I was like, yeah, I mean, that's probably about where it is. One of the podcasts I listen to, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the Flophouse.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The Flophouse is a lot of fun.
I've been a listener of theirs on and off.
So they have their rating system where, is this a good, bad movie? Is this a bad movie? Or is this a movie you kind of liked? And I was thinking about this, and I'm like, it doesn't fit any of those. Because like you said, it's not a good, bad movie, and that it's bad in so many ways that you're like, this is enjoyable to watch because it's hilarious that something like this actually got made. It's not that. And it's not a bad movie, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a steaming pile of dookie. How did this ever get made? But at the same time, I didn't really like it. I wasn't offended by it because it was, so bad, but I was just kind of like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a mess of a movie. There are so many things. I was glancing through the notes I took, and there are so many different times where I wrote down, this is dumb, this is dumb, this is dumb. But again, not to the point where it was enjoyably dumb, but also not all the way in that like irredeemable sort of, it's just a mess. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think that's where I ended up as well.
It just has a lot going on and nothing going on at the same time.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. Like, it felt like a wheel spin movie, even though half the cast from the other movies died. It felt like it was just a wheel spin.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give us a quick sort of summary, and then why don't we just go ahead and jump into maybe to be nice to the movie. Let's talk first about what worked, and then let's spend some time talking about what didn't work. So,
for sure.
The movie kicks off, and it goes back to 1986, and you've got Professor X and Magneto going to meet Jean Grey as a child. They kind of invite her to come to the mansion, and again, I already have some issues with this, which we'll talk about in the what worked and what didn't work section. Then we jump, and we see some kid who's like cutting and like filing off wings, and his dad happens to find him. Fast forward to the present time. We've got a company.
Well, no, not the present time. The somewhat close future or something like that, or not too distant future. That's what it was.
Yes, thank you for the not too distant future. And it does start off with this big battle that I don't remember if it was me remembering this or if it was just there was enough that looked hokey about this that I was like, oh, this is clearly a Danger Room scenario.
Immediately you knew it was the Danger Room.
Yeah, I never once believed that this was actually happening, and I think we were supposed to. But anyway, like I say, we'll kind of hit the big points. We find out that Worthington Labs, the pharmaceutical company started by this dude who saw his son trying to like cut off his wings and discovered he was a mutant, they've created a cure for the mutations. It will, an inoculation that will basically suppress the X gene and offer this cure to anyone who wants it. It's coming from a young mutant named Jimmy who has the ability to nullify mutations when you get close to him. Some are interested in the cure, some don't want it. Magneto puts together the Brotherhood of Mutants to try and oppose the cure, telling them that, and the line he is that they're going to force this on us, and of course they come out and they're like, oh, this is voluntary. This is just if you want. But Magneto's like, they're going to force this on us. We got to fight this. In the meantime, Mystique has been captured. She is being transported. Magneto comes and rescues her. She tries to save Magneto. She gets shot with the cure darts and turns into a regular person. And Magneto, like the cold SOB he is, just turns around and leaves her. Takes off. In the meantime, we've got Scott Summers being so distraught about the death of Jean from the previous movie that he goes back up to Alkali Lake, where she comes up out of the water with real long hair, looking a little different than she did when we last saw her. She gives him a kiss, and then boom, he's toast. Professor X can tell something's wrong, sends Logan and Storm up there, and they just find a bunch of mist that Storm blows away, and then just all sorts of things telekinetically floating around, including Cyclops' glasses, and then there's Jean unconscious. Take her back to the mansion, whole big scene with Xavier explaining what's going on. We find out about the Phoenix. We'll talk about this more, I guarantee it. All of a sudden, Jean Grey wakes up. She kind of goes crazy, knocks out Logan, escapes the mansion. Magneto one of the people he's picked up along the way, she can sense powerful mutants, and this person senses a class 5 mutant, and he kind of knows who it is. So they go and they get her. He arrives at the same time as Charles at her home where the movie started. And in the midst of all this, Jean / the Phoenix gets pissed off, elevates the whole house telekinetically, is smashing people against the ceiling, lifts Charles up out of his wheelchair, and then basically vaporizes him. And then, boom, house falls down. She leaves with Magneto. Mystique, pissed off, understandably, that Magneto just left her for nothing on the bed on the floor of the trailer. She basically gives up the location of the Brotherhood. The FBI try and surround it. However, it's all just copies of Multiple Man. They've gone to storm Alcatraz because that's where this pharmaceutical company, they set up shop in Alcatraz. That's where they're making the cure.
Because why wouldn't you?
Because they specifically say it's the safest place because it's Alcatraz, which, whatever. There's a big fight with bad guys and good guys there, and most of it, Jean's just kind of standing there. Kitty Pryde manages to go through the walls until she can get this kid Jimmy, rescuing him from a version of the Juggernaut who'd been sent to kill him. Then Magneto, in a classic ruse, gets distracted by Logan while Hank McCoy, a.k.a. Beast? That's what his mutant name is, right? Mm-hmm. He stabs Magneto with a handful of the cure darts that powers down Magneto, and then all of a sudden Jean decides it's time to go crazy, and she just starts destroying anyone and everything. Logan, realizing that he's got his adamantium indestructible skeleton and the healing factor is the only one who can get close enough, he walks up to her, sort of being vaporized and healing at the same time. All of a sudden, Jean comes through the Phoenix, begs him to save her, and so he then stabs her with his claws, kills her, and then, boom, fast forward to the end. We're at the school, Storm's in charge. Hank McCoy is going to be the mutant ambassador to the United Nations. Rogue got the cure, so she and Iceman, Bobby, can now actually hold hands. He's not sure how he feels about it. And then the last scene, we've got Magneto. Well, not the last scene, the last pre-credit scene. We've got Magneto sitting at a chessboard. Seems to be normal, but he points towards one of the metal chess pieces and makes it wiggle. And then boom, we've got credits. And now, hearkening back to a scene earlier, we have a guy who basically was a functioning body but no brain, wakes up, and in Charles's voice says, "Hello, Moira," to Moira McTaggart, who had been helping out. And then boom, the movie's over. So, what did you think?
I completely forgot that there was a post-credit sequence in this movie. I just turned it off.
Oh, no. I remembered that it was there because...
I remembered it earlier when they set it up where they're like, what are the ethics of this empty body? And then I was like, oh, yeah, he body swaps with that shit. And then I'd forgotten by the end because as soon as the credits rolled, I closed it and I was like, well, okay.
You're like, oh, that's enough. All right, so let's talk about what worked. What did you think worked?
The Beast casting is very good.
Yep, I agree.
Kelsey Grammer as the Beast is great. He has some very funny lines. The practical effects are largely very good, once again. And they didn't go over the top with weird scars and or scales, so he's just a hairy blue guy, and he looks great.
Yeah,
and I know I've seen what Nicholas, what's his name, Huth, I can't remember his last name, looks like in the later ones. He looks terrible. How did they get worse at this?
I think that it's from the start. One of those transitions of too much CGI, not enough practical.
Well, there you go, because you can tell that's Kelsey Grammer in a silly-looking bodysuit, and it works. So that's good.
It totally does.
As always, Magneto was right. As I've said on the last 2 episodes, Magneto was right. Because he's like, they're going to weaponize this, and what do they immediately do? Make plastic guns
out of it. Plastic guns
so not even Magneto can stop it with weaponized cure. So, like, he was right. Does he again follow in the tradition of just about every Marvel villain in both the MCU and out of it in the last 20 years of being right but too much? Obviously. But he's also right.
Yep. Agreed.
Moving the Golden Gate Bridge to be able to get onto Alcatraz, pretty baller move. Not going to lie there.
Yeah, but
it looks stupid. It looks stupid and pointless, but it's a cool idea of Magneto being like, yes, I'm strong enough to lift the entire Golden Gate Bridge and divert it to Alcatraz. I don't think those two are geographically that close to one another. I could be wrong. I don't think the geography works out, but I guess it does in the X-Men world. But I did write down, moving the bridge. What a dumb, stupid, fun idea.
And see, I put it that one, I was like, why? It was cool to watch, but I'm like, that was kind of pointless. I mean, there's a brief comment with, I don't remember which of the mutants is, maybe it's Juggernaut or somebody who's like, oh, I can't swim or something like that. And then I'm like, okay, well, I understand the showmanship, and I appreciate the showmanship behind moving this whole big segment of the bridge. But also, again, one of the many things that just strained, I wanted to say strained credulity, but obviously you've already had to kind of put that all aside for these kinds of movies in general. But that even within this world made me go, that's not working for me. If we think back to previous movies, that would have left Magneto drained and not able to participate in the fight.
100%.
And so that was, I think, where I was like, well, that was dumb. And then the other part that just didn't work for me in that, and I realized I've jumped into what didn't work. But because you mentioned this, it goes from like daytime, we're moving the bridge, we land the bridge on Alcatraz Island, and it is now immediately pitch black. Like, it is not just dusk. It is not suns. It is black. Now, I don't know about San Francisco, but I know where I live, we go from sun going down to the time where it's that dark. We're talking hours.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know it's faster than where you live because you live in the mountains. I live out in the hilly plains, and it is much faster than Utah, Idaho, but still takes a while. And I have spent enough time on the coast in my days to know that it still takes time. It is not like a light switch.
No, but it felt like it.
So what did you think worked in this movie?
Oh, okay.
That's it. That's it for me. Oh, Kitty Pryde's casting. Elliot Page does great work.
Yep, she's good. Wolverine is pretty good. I mean, he's, for me, one of the main reasons you're going to watch these movies.
Jackman's great. The scene where he where they're in the danger room and he's still trying to light his cigar off the top of a burning car, and you're like, what are you doing, bro? It might look real. This is still the danger room, bro. No, your cigar is not going to light from this. Jackman's bringing it. Jackman always brings it.
He does. I'm going to say this part with a caveat, and that is, over the course of these movies, I got to the end and I thought I would have liked more from Bobby Drake, because I think that the guy who plays him, and I have no idea who it is, but I think he does a pretty decent job. And I actually, at the end of this movie, I was like, you know what? I would have liked more from him. I would have liked them to have written him better, because I thought he was actually good. If they'd have given him good material to work with, I think he actually could have been a standout character.
For sure. And like, I think that Bobby Drake is a really interesting character. And the ways in which he keeps getting stronger whenever he needs to get stronger is pretty cool. And you see that even in this movie when he's fighting with Pyro, and then he goes to full ice mode, which is the first time we've seen full ice mode. That's cool. And like, he is one of those, you know, in the comics, he's one of the Omega level mutants. Like, he is one of the strongest mutants on the planet. And you just don't get that from these movies, but I think you could have.
Yeah, I think you could have as well. So I think that the scene at Jean's house when she basically is just disintegrating Charles is pretty brutal. And there are things about that scene that I liked. I thought that in some ways that scene worked. In other ways it didn't. But it was one of the standout scenes to me from the film.
I mean, who doesn't love to watch suburbia get destroyed? I'm in for that any day of the week.
So the rest of what I have is all the stuff that didn't work. So I'm going to start, I'll throw something out and then we'll just kind of bounce back and forth.
Sounds good.
I'm going to start right at the very beginning. The scene with Jean Grey as a child, and all of a sudden her, first of all, being kind of pissy and lifting up all of the cars in the neighborhood and then dropping them down. That amount of telekinesis is so far above and beyond what we had seen from her in the previous two movies. Now, could it be that that's because this is pre-Charles screwing around with her brain, like he openly admits to doing and being yet again another example of being an awful person? Maybe that's what they're trying to convey to us. But just right out of the gate, I'm like, well, this is, again, you know, you kind of have to think about, and one of the podcasts that I listen to that talks about the MCU stuff, they go on about power levels a lot. And I think that you have to be really careful in superhero movies that you're consistent with the power levels, or that at least you've got logical and coherent explanations within universe to describe changes in a character's power levels. And I did not feel that they did the work necessary in this movie for that to have occurred. So that was the first thing that didn't work for me.
And I think that you're right that that's across the board. Jean is stronger than she's ever been before. Magneto's stronger than he's ever been before.
Oh, yeah.
Wolverine's stronger than he ever has been before. I mean, we got shot in the head. He was knocked out cold for like 3 minutes in the last movie. And now he's like literally disintegrating and still being able to walk up the hill and like have the heartfelt goodbye with his pointless love interest. Like everybody's...
Cue the power of love now. That's what's playing in my head. It was the power of love. I'm kidding, of course. I'm kidding.
But at least, like we just were talking about, at least there was a reason why Bobby suddenly got stronger. Why? Yeah. Where was everybody else's secondary mutation like that? Come on.
Yeah. So, what was something that didn't work for you?
The de-aging tech in that scene does look really good, though. They do genuinely look 20 years younger.
It did. And I wrote that down in my notes. I said the de-aging looks pretty good. I mean, it looks better than de-aging we've had in more recent movies. So give them credit for that. Well,
let's be honest. They're so lazy these days when it comes to CGI. I don't know. The pinnacle of special effects was 1993's Jurassic Park, and everything since has looked worse somehow. I don't understand it.
Well, and also... you know, maybe not Ian McKellen, but Patrick Stewart is such an amazingly just well-crafted human being that you didn't really have to, you know, I mean, even in 2006, he looked pretty damn good. You didn't have to do that much to make him to make him look that much younger. Just smooth out a few little wrinkles here and there. But that man has aged like a fine wine. I say that,
but McKellen
happens to a fine wine, but I don't.
They get less sweet. That's basically what happens. The flavors get stronger. They get less sweet. I'm not a big wine drinker. But McKellen, it's a big difference. It's a far bigger change with him because he's got darker colored hair, and he does have considerable more wrinkles than Patrick Stewart does at that point in their lives. But they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, definitely. So what was something that didn't work for you?
Trying to up Halle Berry as such a main character after 2 movies of nothing really felt like they were doing the contracts for movie 3, and she was like, you did me dirty twice, you can't do me dirty a third time. And they do her dirty a third time, but in a very different way than they did in the other 2. But they really try to and I get where they're coming from. In the 80s, Storm stepped up and became the leader of the X-Men when Cyclops and Marvel Girl and Iceman went off to make X Factor. They were a different team entirely. So Storm has been an erstwhile leader of the X-Men on and off for decades in the comics, but they didn't build that groundwork, and then so suddenly she's so central to keeping this team together and keeping the school running. It was just like, you didn't set this up in a way that this payoff means anything.
Yeah. Agree. And, I was a little bothered by, it was just almost too on the nose, kind of the first big scene where Charles is talking to the students. The announcement for the cure is all of a sudden hitting, and he sees all these storm clouds forming, and he goes outside and he's just like, oh, something on your mind? It was just a little too on the nose in terms of her being grumpy, and we have a whole bunch of storm clouds that appear. Like, come on.
Incredibly
control yourself
so.
a little bit better. I'm going to say this again. Scott, they never ever knew what to do with his character. And I guess I didn't realize this until I was actually reading in Wikipedia. James Marsden had actually basically left the movie, to go work on Superman Returns, which is why Bryan Singer didn't direct this, because that's what he was working on as well.
I forgot that he was Lois Lane's husband.
Yeah. So, maybe that's why
Superman movie.
He's he just didn't do anything for me. But again, his character just never worked for me in any of the movies, and even less so here. He's supposed to be sort of, we've got Charles who's kind of the guy behind this, but we're supposed to be looking at Cyclops as the leader of the X-Men, and he's the guy who's, taking them on missions and keeping everything together, and man, he can't keep anything together. I mean, this guy's just kind of a mess. We don't know how long in between the end of this movie, or the end of X2 and the beginning of this one, how much time is supposed to have passed. And so maybe I'm being unfair, but the way he's still just like incredibly just moping and doing nothing. I mean,
long enough for Jean's hair to go from a stylish pixie cut to halfway down her back.
It's true. I mean, her hair grew a lot, and so
that's a long time. That's at least a year or two's worth of growth.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, everybody else seems to be over it enough that I'm like, he should have, at this point, in my opinion, at least, reached some sort of level of, okay, I have other responsibilities here. Let me step up and take care of that. Yeah. I honestly think that it was just, he was out of the movie and they had to write him out as quick as possible.
Yeah, makes sense.
So what else? What else didn't work for you?
Horny camera choices. This is so clear. Again, this is not, Bryan Singer is not directing this one. Brett Ratner is directing this one. And he is a director that enjoys the female form and likes to show you the things that he likes about the female form on the screen. And so there were some real lascivious camera choices that were made that I was just like, you wouldn't have gotten that in a Bryan Singer film.
Yeah. Yep.
And like, again, as always, screw Bryan Singer. He's a terrible human being. Throw him into the sun. But like, really, Brett? Really, Brett?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the one thing I'll say, and this is me trying to be too generous, he's not as bad as Michael Bay.
I mean, yeah.
I'm just sort of teasing. Whenever you talk about creepy camera shots, the first director who comes to my mind is Michael Bay.
You think of Megan Fox on the motorcycle in Transformers 2 Revenge of the Fallen, and you're like, what the hell, Michael Bay?
I don't know, man.
This is a child.
I think it might be worse in Transformers 3.
Oh, the way that Sam Witwicky's girlfriend is like ogled by the camera because she's a literal model. Gross.
Yeah. So uncomfortable.
Gross.
And so bad. So bad. So I don't know.
It's just an incoherent film. Like,
well, it is.
It's a mess, and it doesn't. The pieces don't fit well together. The cure, whether or not the cure even works, is left up to debate. There's so many pointless Easter eggs in it, like the Secretary of Defense being named Trask, and you're like, ooh, Boulevard Trask.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things like that you're like, none of this needed to be here. Why did when they attack the island, why did it look like a toku quarry? Like, I felt like I was watching Kamen Rider or something, and they're using the same quarry that they use for every single Japanese tokusatsu show to shoot in. Like, what was this set? Is this the cheapest set that you could possibly make?
Yeah, and it definitely did not look like Alcatraz Island. No.
And why... there's a ton of like nameless mook mutants. Why were every one of their powers just like acrobats? Like, you couldn't get a little more creative with your foot soldier people? Like, take 30 more seconds and give them some interesting powers besides toad but no tongue, which is what the vast majority of them were. Like, what?
Well, and
I don't know.
That scene comes, it kind of makes me think, you mentioned, yes, Magneto's right. He just goes about it the wrong way. But I think that scene also clearly demonstrates that he's kind of a piece of crap too.
Oh, because I'm not saying he's a good guy.
Well, no, but I mean, like, he literally says, he espouses to, I want to unite the mutants. I want us to come together. We are superior. Let's, strengthen numbers, this sort of thing. And then literally says, no, we're not, he's got his little hand-picked crew who are the ones who we've seen more through the movie. Nope, hold back. Let these chumps go and get shot.
Let the pawns go first, is what he says.
Yep. Let the pawns go first.
Which, again, continues the chess motif that we have seen with him throughout all of these films, which, again, is belied by what happens at the end. But still, it's pretty gross.
Yeah. Speaking of gross, let's talk about Charles. We've brought it up multiple times.
The absolute scum of the earth Charles Xavier is in this trilogy. And this movie, even more than the other two, he is utterly unlikable in every scene. He's so cruel and prickly and mean, and like whenever anyone questions him, especially like the scenes between him and Wolverine, where Wolverine is like, yo, this is messed up, and he's like, I did what was right, and it's like, bro, chill. And then he dies and Wolverine is all torn up, and I just want to be like, bro, this is a dude who all I have seen him in your interactions on screen belittle you, lie to you, hide your past from you, and treat you like dirt. Why do you care that this grumpy old bald man died?
Right. I mean, one of the things that, so many things about him in not just this movie, but as we've talked about in the previous, but one of the things that really bothered me in this movie, we get the scene where he's explaining to Logan about Jean. And we're going to talk about this next, because this is another thing that just, it doesn't work for me. It's messy. It's stupid. Why they made this change, I don't understand.
It's real bad.
But so he comes and he says, oh, basically, Jean has two personalities. There's Jean, and then there's the Phoenix. And the Phoenix just wants pleasure and passion and, you know, basically more
all
kind of the animalistic side of her. And then we've got Jean. And I had to make sure, so that her powers didn't get out of control. Basically, I stuck my fingers in her brain and rearranged things and like altered who this person is, because I felt that it was necessary. And that's where Logan's like, dude, that's messed up. You shouldn't just get to like play God with people's brains. But Charles is like, totally, yeah, I can, because I can. And then
the thesis of the film is that he was right.
Yeah, exactly. But then he leaves, and Logan's in there just, you know, being the dutiful, doting schmuck who he is when anything has to do with Jean Grey, which again, relationship never bought. They never sold it. It never worked for me. Mm-mm. But he's standing there waiting. She wakes up, and all of a sudden, yeah, she's like super horny and is going after Logan. And all of a sudden he just says like, well, what about Scott? What did you do to Scott? What happened to Scott?
Yeah. She basically starts sexually assaulting him, and he's like, I'm not okay with this. And she's like, I don't give a shit what you think. I'm okay with it. And it's like, don't sexually assault the man, Jean Grey.
Yeah. And then she throws him, knocks him out. And then she leaves.
Well,
Charles
comes in. He's like, what happens with Scott? And then she's like, reverts to Jean Grey, and she's like, oh, I killed Scott. And then he's like, well, why the hell did you do that? And she's like, you gotta kill me. And he's like, I'm not gonna kill you. And then she's like, well, then I'm gonna be evil. And then she drives away.
That's true. But so my question is this. When Charles comes down, they find Wolverine, who's been laid out cold by Jean. What's the first thing Charles does? He starts blaming this on Wolverine.
Uh-huh.
Like, no, you're the one who, like, this is your problem, Charles.
Fault.
This is literally your fault. You are the one who created this problem. He did nothing except get sexually assaulted by her and then blasted across the freaking room. And the way Charles is such a jackass to Wolverine in this scene, I just couldn't understand it. Like, where is this coming from? All it did truly was make me go, you know what? I am going to be totally okay when you get blasted to atoms. I really am. I'm going to be okay when Charles gets vaporized, because he deserves it, because he sucks.
I'm cool with it. You're a bad guy.
Yeah, he is. And time again. I mean, we go back to earlier on, he's talking to the students and he tells them about this dude who has like no higher brain functions, but his body's totally fine. So I'm going to be a little bit of a pedant here. If his brain stem is working okay, they shouldn't need to support him quite as much as they do, but whatever, leave that all alone. He brings up the ethics. Oh, would it be ethical to then transport your brain into this other person? Setting up the whole idea that no, this would not be right. And then he freaking goes and does it and is totally okay with it. He's like, oh, hello, Moira. And I'm like, you hypocritical SOB.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing that kills me the most about this. We watch him get atomized. We see him wake up in the extremely hirsute body in Ireland or wherever the hell Moira McTaggart is. And then by Days of Future Past, it's him again. He's alive again. And by Logan, he's alive again as Patrick Stewart, not as Hirsute Man. ¿Qué pasó? ¿Cómo es posible que esto pasó? I do not understand. The interior logic of the film has somehow fallen apart here.
Well, and I think part of the problem is X-Men First Class got made as a reboot. And then when Days of Future Past happened, different writer, different director, different team, that was where they decided to try and retcon these two X-Men universes into one unified universe.
Sure.
And so I think that's where you get a lot of the messiness. But yes, totally doesn't work and sets things up in such a way that you're like, I mean,
I have an answer for you. According
Perfect.
to the Wikipedia page for Charles Xavier film character, on the DVD commentary, it is revealed that the body on Muir Island is someone named P. Xavier. One of the writers noted that this character is Xavier's twin brother, who was born brain dead due to Professor X's amount of power. Since P. Xavier was born brain dead and stuck in a coma for his whole life, Charles Xavier can't walk in his brother's body and uses his old wheelchair. Xavier's return is an example of a comic book death, which refers to comic book characters getting killed off, but not staying dead permanently, which has happened to Charles Xavier in the comics as well. This scene was not in the script, but secretly added during filming. So there's your answer. It is his twin brother. So that's why when he comes back, he's still paralyzed and looks the same.
that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
What?
And not even in a fun way. It's not even doesn't make sense in a fun way.
Because if you're trying to tell me he can't walk because he jumped into a body that's never walked, well, then why can he use his arms just fine? Because if he's never used his legs, then he's never used his arms either.
Yeah, because if this body has been brain dead its whole life, there's no world where they keep a brain dead body alive for 60 plus years.
No, and also there's no world in which that body is as
functional.
Normal. Well, is normal sized with actual muscles and things like that? Because no, that's not happening.
Because it never would have developed. Just like you're saying, it never would have developed.
Yeah.
Those muscles would have been completely atrophied. They would have been just like Laffy Taffy. It wouldn't have been muscle.
Wow. That's just...
Anyway, so there's our answer. It's P. Xavier's body.
The explanation actually, in my opinion, makes the scene worse.
Agreed.
Okay, well, let's talk about the glaring bright orange bird in the room, and that is the Phoenix. You're the one with the much more extensive comic book background. So why don't you start? Tell us all the reasons why the idea of the Phoenix in this movie is such a steaming pile of shite.
I mean, so the Phoenix is Jean Grey's horny? Like... That's all you can come up with as to a reason why she's so much more powerful, is that is Jean Grey unchained? Like, it doesn't make sense. In the comics, the Phoenix is a extra-dimensional entity. In the Marvel Universe, there are certain entities that are like extra-dimensional and live at such a level that they're not really... like on the same level with regular sapient beings. And when they come into conflict with those regular sapient beings, it's when you get some really crazy stuff happening. Like, say, Galactus. In theory, Galactus is supposed to, and this is all stuff that's been explained in the comics. The reason why Galactus eats everything is when the 8th universe started, things went wrong, and the life bringer was turned into the world eater. Galactus is supposed to be a life bringer who creates planets instead of a creature that eats planets. But he is one of those. There's always a life bringer every time the universe is restarted. And so a type of Galactus type creature is there. There is always a Phoenix, a form of rebirth that often presages the end of an old universe and the beginning of a new universe. And so that's what you get with the Phoenix Force. It is, this... supernatural force, this otherworldly force, an immortal and immutable manifestation of the universal force of life and passion that Jean Grey has been the host of when they went to space, but a lot of other people have also been the host of. Rachel Summers has been the host of the Phoenix. That's Jean and Scott's kid from a different timeline, from the Days of Future Past timeline. Hope Summers, which is a different Jean and... Look, Jean and Scott have had a lot of kids who have been time displaced and then come back from the future. They've got Rachel. Okay. They've got Cable. Cable's one of their kids who's been time displaced and brought back from the future. Hope Summers is one of their kids who's been time displaced and brought back from the future. Strife is one of their kids who's come back from the future. So those two have way too many kids that they then get sent to the future in weird dystopian timelines and then come back. And many of them then become hosts to the Phoenix Power, like Hope Summers, like Rachel Summers, like in Avengers vs. X-Men. 5 of the X-Men split up the power. So you've got Cyclops, Namor, because why not Namor, Emma Frost, Colossus, and Magic all become parts of the Phoenix Force. And then eventually Cyclops goes crazy and collects all the Phoenix Force, and that's when he kills Charles Xavier. But that's like, this is what the Phoenix Force is. It's this weird power that comes from outer space, possesses some people, things go poorly, and then it goes away again. It's not like some weird alter ego.
No, like he literally says that it's a split personality.
Yeah, it's dumb. It's real dumb.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. And like you said, the idea that we're supposed to understand, believe, accept whatever you want, that the only reason this personality is so much more powerful is basically because they don't have the constraints of social mores on them, so they can just do whatever they want. Look, I am not going to say that a movie we're going to watch later, Dark Phoenix, is a good movie, because it is a bad movie, and it is probably worse than this movie. But if I remember correctly, at least the Phoenix Force comes from an outer space encounter that Jean Grey has with this entity.
Well, that's good.
So at least they got that part of it. But this it's stupid. It feels lazy. And just, I don't know. It bothered me, and I don't even really know the comics that well, but nothing about this worked. Nothing about the character worked. It was a mess.
It was a mess.
Couple other things that just bothered me that I want to get off my chest, since this is the airing of grievances here. Rogue. Why did they ever even put her dirty in these movies? She is such a nothing burger. She is such a waste of time and of space, and they do nothing with her. I mean, I understand, yes, in the first one, she was important because Magneto's going to transfer his powers to her, but still, she feels completely useless, and in this movie, even more so.
Well, she didn't do anything in this movie except for get cured.
No, we're supposed to feel bad for her when Bobby Drake and Kitty Pryde go out and go ice skating because he can freeze over the pond or the fountain, and they can go do that. And she's watching on, and I think we're supposed to feel some sort of betrayal. But I'll be honest, Bobby Drake really didn't do anything, in my opinion. I didn't feel like he ever crossed any line. He was out there with a fellow student helping somebody out. He doesn't even get cozy in with her or anything. He holds her hand because they're freaking ice skating, but I'm like, she's just...
Or at the funeral, he reaches over and holds her hand while he's still holding Rogue's hand.
Still holding her hand.
These are clearly just friends. And yeah, there's a couple lingering shots where maybe Kitty is feeling some things towards Bobby, but it never comes to any sort of thing. And Bobby it is never implied that Bobby feels any sort of thing towards her besides friendship and kindness and camaraderie.
Human, basic human decency towards this person that he is close to because they're freaking students. It just, and I don't know. And that's her impetus to go and get the cure so that now she can touch him. And, she comes back and he literally says to her, he's like, I did not ask for this.
Yeah.
I did not ask you to do this.
Excuse me for being a little blue here, but Rogue, there are fetish websites. You can find latex. You could do plenty of touching without a skin-to-skin connection, girl. There is a solution here that you could have found that was not immutably change my genetic code forever so I could get a kiss from my boyfriend. What?
Yeah.
And it's just I mean, we talked about this in other movie or other podcasts where we were talking about these films, but just as a person who grew up watching the X-Men cartoon, which is not good. I tried to revisit it on Disney Plus. It's garbage. It's not a good show. But I liked it when I was a kid. And did I have a huge crush on Rogue? You bet I did. She was hot and she had big 80s hair and talked in a sexy Southern accent. What's not to love about that? And you're like, she's big and she's strong and she's cool. And then they do this with her in these movies? Betrayal.
It's so bad.
Betrayal of the millennial youth who had a crush on Rogue from the 90s cartoon.
Yep. Completely wasted her character. And the fact that they felt like they needed to keep bringing her back in every movie after the first, where at least she was sort of part of the plot, but in the next two, just so...
Nothing.
Just so useless. So useless.
Nothing.
Question for you. Why do villains like stupid lairs? So
that's a good question.
Magneto's sitting there and he's got his chair in this big room that's got these weird angular walls of metal where it looks like basically you took a piece of paper, you crumpled it up, and then you unfolded it. And that's what it looks like. And I saw this and it immediately brought to mind one of the final scenes in the last episode of Obi-Wan, where you've got Vader sitting in Mustafar. And I thought the same thing. I'm like, this is stupid. Why do you have a throne room where there's nothing else in there? There's literally you sitting in this massive room. Like, it's just a stupid lair. Why do bad guys like stupid lairs? Or why do movies make it so bad guys have stupid lairs? I thought Magneto's was stupid, and it made me think of Mustafar, which was stupid.
What is the appeal of a throne, guys? To be worshipped by your citizenry, by your, subjects. And if your subjects aren't there, then what is the point of a throne?
Bingo. Anyway, final thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. At least, I don't know. I haven't seen Obi-Wan. Hopefully Darth Vader's was also like a Cure Me throne, like the one in Empire Strikes Back, the cool geodesic dome that he sits in, which is a place where he can take his... Oh, God.
There's another scene in, I don't remember if it was episode 3 or 4, where Obi-Wan gets injured and he has to get dunked in a back-to-tank, and it does this back and forth where Obi-Wan's in the back-to-tank, but then Vader is de-roboticized with missing his arms and legs, and he's in a back-to-tank. And so, no, this throne in Obi-Wan, literally, it's just him sitting on a big fancy throne with a little hologram screen for the Emperor to tell him what to do and what not to do.
Dumb.
Final thing that really, really bothered me. Okay, we've got Magneto. He just lifted the whole Golden Gate Bridge, moved it over here. We have this big fight. Pretty high body count in this movie.
Extremely high.
The mutants have clearly shown on both sides that they're not necessarily to be trusted. And the movie ends and then boom. We don't know how long exactly has passed, but everything's hunky-dory and everybody's happy. And it's just like, hey, mutants are great. We love you guys. This is cool. And like everything seemed okay after we have this huge conflict with Jean Grey, who's basically annihilating anyone and everything that gets close to her. And as soon as that's all done, everybody's just like, cool. There were zero consequences.
We're going to make the blue guy our ambassador to the UN to show that we love mutants. What?
I mean, look.
Excuse?
There are still issues with it, but at the very least, I got to give Kevin Feige and the MCU credit that they have taken steps to show that there is fallout from the actions of superpower people.
Yeah.
And in this, there were zero. I mean, nothing. And it was such an abrupt change to go from stab Jean Grey as she's annihilating everything close to her to now all of a sudden, boom, it's sunny, everybody's happy, and, we're all holding hands and singing Kumbaya and shit.
Warren Worthington is flying around San Francisco and everybody's just like, oh, wow, that's a boy with wings, instead of being like, oh my God, there's a person with wings! Like...
And just earlier, they were freaking out about everything. The ending was garbage and a mess in so many different ways. But sadly, like you said, not fun ways.
It felt like they were really trying to put a bow on it. Like they were like, this is our last of our trilogy. Because this was back when that was what you made, was a trilogy, before they decided to start making quadrilogies and quintilogies and all of these. Especially when they take book series and they're like, that last book... 2 movies. We got it, baby. More money. But It used to be trilogies. Trilogies was the thing. That's just
totally.
When I think of 80s, 90s, and 2000s movies, it's trilogy times. And so clearly this is the final of a trilogy. It's called The Last Stand. Clearly this is supposed to be the last one for a while. And so I felt like they were just trying to like tie everything up neatly, but the pieces as they laid on the board at the 95% mark did not justify the bow tying at the 100% mark.
Not at all. Not at all. So, I don't know. Like I say, it was not as out and out bad as I thought it was going to be.
Honestly, I wish it had been a little worse.
Yes, because it would have been more fun. It would have been more fun if it was a little bit worse. Like, I'm actually comparing this to what I remember about Dark Phoenix. I'm kind of looking forward to watching Dark Phoenix because in my head, and I could be proven wrong, but in my head, it goes that extra bit, that extra far to be like, you know, this is not just bad, but this is like, oh my gosh, how did people ever get paid to make this bad? So
no, that sounds fun. I mean, that's how I remember feeling about our next film too. So we'll see.
Yep, me too. So I guess we'll see. But like I say, this disappointing.
Just a wet fart all around.
At the end of it, I just felt like I was a father. I mean, I am a father, but I felt like I was talking to one of my children and looking at them in the eyes with a downcast face and saying, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, that's very similar to how I felt about it. It wasn't bad enough to be memorable. And that is the most damning thing that I could say about it.
Yep, 100%. Well, in a couple 4 weeks or so, we're going to wrap around and we're going to take on one of the side dalliances with X-Men Origins Wolverine. I haven't watched that movie in a long time. We're going to see, again, can it move beyond the boring, bland bad into the slightly delightfully bad section of bad movies? We'll find out. But until then,
hope so.
Until then, we appreciate everybody. Like we always say, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. We would love to get a review, some comments, rate it on iTunes. That's definitely one of the things that can help. If anybody's listening, drop a review, leave a rating. It does help move things up in the visibility side of things. And if you've got any comments, questions, feedback at themiddleofculture.com. We'll get you there, and we'll see your comments, and we'll even go ahead and address them. We will answer any questions that are sent in. We'll answer them in a future podcast episode.
I guess that's the end.
That's
That's just how we end it. We end it disappointingly, just like the. No, just kidding.
And of course, we're gonna have to leave this all in because, yeah, that's the thing is you get to the end of this movie and it's just like, I mean, I turned to my 12-year-old and I was like, "So what'd you think?" And he kind of just looks at me, he's like, "Eh." That was literally his response. Eh.
Yeah.
Like, yep.
Same.
It's about right. So,
well,
until next time.
Honestly, talking about it was more fun than watching it by tenfold.
Yes, it was. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with something not quite so bad. Hopefully, we're going to find out in just a bit, maybe what we'll be talking about. And until then, thanks again for listening, everyone.
Bye.